get started. Hi, everybody. Welcome to class. This is funny. It feels like a real class all of a sudden, right? It doesn't feel like one of these fake COVID classes. So how's everything going? So far, so good? You guys got a lot of exams and stuff these days? Yeah. Kind of a lot? You feel the weight of the semester weighing down upon you? A little bit? It's getting to be that time, right? I know for me, I'm feeling it because I'm like, especially this weekend, I'm going to grade all this and then I got to prepare for other stuff. You know, sort of the middle is tough. Like the beginning, it's all prep, it's not so bad. The end, it's all grading, not so bad. The middle is pretty tough. Why don't we start with review session? I'll say hi to the chat. Hi, chat. Things. Why don't we start with some review? I have a short lesson to go over with you guys, but it's not like essential, you know, it's not on the exam, for example, and so we can come back to it after the exam. Well, I guess I'll take that back. At least one question is from today's material, one question, and so that I will be sure to go over. I won't tell you which one it is, but so we will want to go over at least some of the lesson for today. Oh, I opened the wrong thing. Foolish me. All right. Review sheet for this class is this one. Okay, so any questions? Tonight is Tuesday. For those who are just joining us, the exam will start at 7:30, and I'll try to be, you know, on the dot about that. I'll make sure we have a break too. So I want to shut down by like 7:20. Give you guys a 10-minute break. You know, do some jumping jacks, do whatever you want to do, and then we can get into it. So very short little lesson. It'll just be a half hour. Any questions? Review sheet questions? Anything else you want to go over? Like I said, I have things to teach, so if you don't want to do this, I'm happy to switch to the materials. Please. Yeah, what's the deal with the earth? Why does the earth matter? It's kind of an odd person or thing or God. I guess we could call it a God, but it's not even really a God. Yeah, excellent. So cover of the book, right? If you look at the Buddha's, his right hand, it would be our left. He's touching the earth. And yeah, as what's your name? Matthew. Yeah, I'm not going to know any of your names, so forgive me. As Matthew said, it's this moment where Mara is challenging him, right? And saying, hey, are you sure you belong here? Are you sure you're achieving enlightenment? If you're really achieving enlightenment, you'd be able to prove it somehow, but you don't have any proof. Nobody was there when you did all those things you're claiming to do. So almost like trying to bring up an imposter syndrome in him. Do you guys know about imposter syndrome? It's big in academia, right? Because we're supposed to know everything. And, you know, the secret is we don't know everything. So it's very easy to fall into those traps. And Mara is trying to do it with him. And he touches the earth and he says, why does the earth matter? Why does the earth matter?
Because it was the witness.
Earth was the witness. Yeah. Let me get the sound louder. Yeah, Earth was the witness, exactly. So the Earth was there for all of his lives, all of his activities. The Earth actually did see him do all these things. So there's almost the sense that even though karma is sort of tricky and hard to understand, and all the good deeds you do might go unnoticed, right? At least in a Christian tradition, God is watching, or at the very least Santa Claus, right? Somebody's watching. And so for the Buddhists, this is actually a bit of a problem. You're doing all these good things and no one's watching. How do you even know it's like registering? And he's basically saying, yes, it is registering, right? It's registering with the earth. Oh, we got some stuff. Pretty good. How about you? Hey, I'm doing good, Kevin. Ignorance. 3 poisons. Okay. Yeah, so we've got the 3 poisons. What's the deal with the 3 poisons? Remember, it's the center of the wheel, right? Those 3 animals. Pig, snake, rooster. So why are they at the center? Is because they're kind of the core of samsara. What is samsara? What do you think, though? Cyclical rebirth, cyclical existence, being reborn again and again. And it's a little hard to explain. Why are these the cause of being reborn again and again? Can you explain that?
I think because like you're born again and again out of like if you do things good or bad, you're born in like a better life or a worse life. So you do that. If you do that, then you're gonna go down and stuff and keep you longer to get to the point where you're no longer.
That's nicely stated. Yeah. So within this karmic worldview, if we do bad stuff, we'll have bad lives. If we do good stuff, we'll have good lives. What is considered bad? Well, is acting through greed, hatred, or ignorance, right? I think that's a nice way to think about it. And so greed and hatred, I think we can all agree are pretty bad. The ignorance one, I think, is what, who asked this question? Raffaele asked about. It's basically seeing things not as they are. It's not a very eloquent way of putting it. Seeing things from a state of misunderstanding, right? And we do this all the time. This is something, again, I've said many times, everything's impermanent. Remember that? Do we always recognize that everything's impermanent? We do not. It's kind of one of the great mysteries of life. It seems to be a fact. And yet we are surprised again and again and again that this thing that, you know, I just thought it might actually last this time, right? I thought it was actually going to work this time, but it didn't work, right? And we're still surprised again and again and again. It's a kind of an amazing thing. And so the Buddhists would call that ignorance, right? It's just this lack of understanding things as they are. And so then, fortunately, there is, something we can do about it, which is to cultivate wisdom and understanding. And we'll get into that more in the second part of this course. Interdependent origination, that one's kind of tough. Interdependent origination, where is that one? Up here. That is actually a Sanskrit term, but I don't even want you to worry about what the Sanskrit is for that. So does anybody know that? What is interdependent origination? Did anybody look that one up? Mm-hmm. That's nicely stated. Yeah, very. What's your name? Lauren. Sounds like Lauren studied this. Good job, Lauren. Yeah, very good. So yeah, exactly. Everything that exists in dependence on other things, and those things in turn exist in dependence on other things, and other things, and other things, and other things. I forget what mythological tradition it is, but there's some sense of all these tortoises stacked on top of each other, and the earth rests on that. Has anybody heard of that before? Like turtles all the way down. It's sort of a similar idea, right? You got to imagine there's something at the bottom of all those turtles, but it's hard to figure out what's there. And physicists try to do that, going into the atoms and so forth. And so this way of thinking actually lends itself quite nicely to science. Early Buddhists from like 100 years ago were saying how scientific they are. Of course, we're going to see how there are many things about Buddhism that are not scientific, but this is actually pretty scientific. It's thinking about all these different parts and pieces, how they come together to create reality, right? And Lauren, right? Like Lauren was saying, it doesn't only apply to physics or matter, right? Material existence. It's also kind of everything. There's an ethical component to it too, right? Why do we do things? Well, part of it is because I did this thing before and that made me predisposed to do it again, and doing it again will make me predisposed to doing it again. And so this is actually part of the trick in Buddhism, is to notice those patterns and try to break them or cultivate them, depending on what intervention you want to make, right? If there's a positive habit you want to get into, you try to cultivate those habits. If there's a negative habit you want to break, you try to push against those dispositions. But yeah, Lauren put it very nicely, is that things exist in dependence upon other things. In other words, nothing is independent, right? All things exist in relation to other things. Very good. Okay, in the interest of actually doing this lesson, maybe one more. Any last dying questions? Should we just do it then? All right, so let's go to the lesson. Very good. Quick recap. I'm going to go through this really fast. I probably have too many slides to actually get through all of them. This is just a review, right? We covered this last time. Death in Buddhism, pretty complicated, right? I asked you guys to talk about it. We talked about the creepy robot, right? I forget who it was. Somebody said they were scared of him and wanted to break him or something like that. And the proper response is sort of unclear, right? On the one hand, we have all these tools to think about impermanence, right? Remember that? On the other hand, all the Buddhists, when the Buddha died, they were very sad. And so this tension arises where we want to recognize suffering. And I think this is key. Something I noticed in my own life, in my own upbringing, in my own education, I'm tempted to say it's an American thing, but I could be wrong in saying that. There's a tendency to kind of brush suffering away, right? And pretend like it's not really a thing. You know, it's like if it's cold outside, you think warm thoughts. If, I don't know, if you have some sort of problem, you just try not to think about it, right? Put your head down, do your work, just don't focus on it, right? Here, the Buddhists are not saying that. The Buddhists are saying, actually, yes, recognize suffering, right? What is the first noble truth? What is the first noble truth? Suffering, yes, you got to recognize it, right? It's there. It even gets an entire noble truth, right? It's definitely there. You got to recognize it. But at the same time, I use the word dynamism. I don't know if that's a great way to put this, but it's just to see that it's not permanent. Suffering, too, is impermanent, right? Just like Lauren was saying, suffering comes from causes and conditions. It comes into being. It goes away from being. Right? And so there's this tension there where you recognize suffering, but then you also get these tools to deal with it. And so that's something we explored last time. Questions about this? I did the robot thing because just to recognize we're not robots, right? We have feelings and we should recognize those feelings. I think the robot thing is sort of almost like a joke. Here, this is where the new stuff begins, the Sangha. We didn't get to this yet. If you were studying, you would have seen Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. This actually, it kind of puts a cap on this entire first part of the course. We talked about the 3 jewels very early on. So again, if you were studying, you probably came back to that slide and saw the 3 jewels. The Buddha is pretty self-explanatory. We read the life of the Buddha. We read it very carefully, right? To the point where you probably were like, oh, I'm tired of this life of the Buddha, right? But we know the Buddha really well now, don't we? And within the life story of the Buddha, there's also the Dharma. So what's the Dharma?
The teaching?
Yeah, the teachings of the Buddha. And so you didn't realize it at the time necessarily, but within this story of the Buddha, we were learning about Buddha's teachings. And then we learned about the 4 Noble Truths, which is probably like the quintessential Dharma teaching, right? The Buddhist teaching. And then finally, the Sangha is the Buddhist community. We started talking about them last time with the nuns. Remember, we talked about Buddhist nuns. Today, we'll talk more about Buddhist monks and nuns. And, you know, after the Buddha achieved enlightenment, there was sort of a question. How are they going to organize themselves? Are they going to become solitary practitioners, right? And just sort of continue doing what the Buddha did, is just practice by yourself in the woods? Some people do that, actually. Are they going to wander around together in groups during the life of the Buddha? That's pretty common, actually. You stay in one place during the monsoon season. You guys are aware of monsoons? The big rains that fall in South Asia, other parts of Asia too, but particularly in India. And so people would stay put during the rainy season and then wander around during the other seasons without any kind of standard place to be. And then eventually monasteries start to develop after the life of the Buddha. And of course, there were monasteries in medieval Europe too, right? And monasteries, similar kind of monastery things everywhere in between. I've read articles arguing that the kind of the origin of these are actually in India. They pass through Central Asia into the Middle East, into Europe. I don't know if I totally buy that argument, but you know, one thing they share is books and learning, right? Scholarship, and that's what Buddhists start to get good at. So there's kind of a development here, but moving from this solitary way of life into more communal ways of life. One defining characteristic of the Sangha is begging. Okay. There's actually another defining characteristic that's not on the slide. Why don't we start with begging though? So the middle way in Buddhism, right? The middle way in Buddhism is one of the key teachings. You guys already know that, right? What is the middle way? Middle way between? What are the 2 extremes that it's avoiding? Good, yeah, extreme greed, extreme asceticism. We could say extreme indulgence, right? Sensual pleasures. So the Buddhists say too much sensual pleasure will cause you problems. Too much asceticism will cause you problems. How does begging solve this problem? Because again, Indulgence could be in the realm of eating. You guys ever indulge in food? It's so easy to indulge in food, isn't it? We're surrounded by delicious things all the time. It's incredible. It's an incredible time to be alive, right? I guess I don't really know any other time to be alive, but you can imagine a time before there were so many treats, so many delicious drinks and snacks you could have, right? We live in an incredible time of indulgence. It's unbelievable. There's so many delicious things to eat. And then an ascetic approach to food would be fasting, I guess. Intermittent fasting is becoming kind of popular. You guys ever intermittent fasted before, right? Because this is a problem we all deal with, right? You want to enjoy life, but you don't want to get out of shape. You don't want to be unhealthy. You don't want to have heart problems or diabetes or whatever, right? We know that indulging too much is bad for us. So this is something we have to deal with. And the Buddhists, the way they figured it out is begging. So how does begging solve this problem of too much indulgence or too much asceticism when it comes to eating? How's begging a good solution here?
Maybe
Chat, go ahead. You guys don't get to talk very much. Go ahead.
maybe because you're only given like X amount, it's uncertain, and so you can only indulge in that certain amount that's given to you that day, so to speak.
Yeah, exactly. So it's kind of not up to you, right? I totally agree with Alexandra. It's not up to you how much you eat. So let's say you go begging and you get a delicious thing. You eat the delicious thing. Let's say you go begging and you get some nasty thing that you don't like. What do you do with that? If you want to eat, you're going to eat it, right? If you don't want to eat, then you can throw it out. But if you want to eat, you're going to eat the nasty thing too. It's not up to you. You don't get a choice about what you eat. You do get to eat though, right? And this is an important distinction. That when the Buddha was really getting deep into asceticism, he wasn't eating. And that's a problem. We all know that that's not okay. And so this is a solution to that problem, is you eat, but you just eat what is given to you. Kind of an interesting solution, right? And so we see here are some monks doing that very activity. In some parts of the world, it happens every day. And in fact, in New York, it happens every day. In certain parts of New York. Monks go out, maybe not every day, but it happens. Let's just say that. It happens in New York. Monks go out, they collect rice, they collect food, very basic food, very simple food, and then bring it back, cook it, and eat it. Or don't cook it, but eat it in some capacity. Monks are called fields of merit. It's this agricultural metaphor where farmers give donations. They kind of plant this seed, so to speak, by giving these donations. The seed is that donation. So what would the fruit be? If monks are these fields, if the farmer, so to speak, is the donor, the seed is the donation, what would the fruit of that seed be? What would the result of that seed be? Can you make sense of this metaphor? Toby? Good karma, yeah. And so you could see this as being a bit of a scam, right? I'm going to go out begging. I'm going to ask for, all the nice things that you guys have to eat. And I'll say, please, can I have some too? What? And then you might think, what am I going to get in exchange? And I'll say, good karma. And you might say, what does that mean? That's not a very material result. And of course, there's sort of a Marxist critique. When Marxism became popular throughout Asia, Buddhists did not do very well. They're not productive members of society. Have you guys ever studied Marxism before? A philosophical prelude to communism, right? And so they're not productive members of society. From a Marxist perspective, they're kind of like leeches, right? They take away from other people. And there's some truth to that, right? In some societies, monks kind of get fat on the efforts of these poor farmers. But in an ideal situation, they're eating the scraps, right? They're not eating like all the most delicious things. They're not getting the cream puff pies and whatever else. They're just getting the leftovers. They're eating what's extra. They're eating what Panera is throwing away every day because it's too stale to sell it, right? They're eating just whatever is left. And so that leads me to another defining characteristic of monks and nuns is they are celibate. What does it mean to be celibate? They don't have sex. Why don't they have sex? It's an indulgence. Yeah, very simply put, I think that's pretty on brand, right? The monks and the nuns, They don't want to indulge. We could also look at it from kind of an economic point of view, because what happens when you have sex? Kids happen when you have sex. And why is it bad for monks and nuns to have kids? It's an economic burden. If they're not productive members of society, they're not producing food, how are they going to feed those kids? They can't. And so this was often kind of part of the deal, right? Monks and nuns can join the monastery, they can get an education, they can learn to read and write and all those other things, but they can't have kids because they can't support the kids because they don't have any food. And they don't produce their own food. Let's say they have to beg for food. And so again, if we think about in an ideal version of society, these are the ones who kind of fill in the gaps, right? If you want to think about how to solve the problem of climate change, and I'm not saying this is what you should do, but the most significant thing you could do is just not have kids, right? That would probably save the most energy, cause the least burden on the planet, right? And that is what these monks and nuns are doing. You can imagine a society where there's not a ton of food to go around. These are people who don't eat very much, don't take that many resources, and don't have any children. Kind of a powerful idea when you think about it. Again, I don't know if this would take off in America, but this was the way to do things throughout Buddhist society. Yeah, Kevin's following along, good. Okay, what did I say, 7:20? All right, so we got 10 minutes left. Why don't we keep going? What did we cover in the reading? We had Angulimala, we had Rhinoceros Horn Sutra. You guys probably saw that in the review sheet and you're wondering what the hell do those mean. There's a couple videos that we could talk about, thinking about how are monks different from other beggars. There's no time to watch the video, but what do you guys think? How are monks different from other beggars? Because I just told you they're beggars, right? They go around begging. If you encountered a monk, would that be different from another beggar? Uh-huh. Interesting. So the motivation is different, right? So for these people, they are taking this burden of austerity, let's say. It's kind of an ascetic lifestyle. Would you guys agree with me? Even though it's not like 100% extreme asceticism, it's like pretty close, right? It's getting pretty close to on the ascetic side of things. But you know, another version of this difficult lifestyle might not be a choice, right? Maybe you just lose the game of capitalism. And so it's worth thinking about, right? Next time you see a beggar, I encourage you to think, how is this person different from a monk? Because in the end, I would argue they're actually not that different. It's an interesting point, and I would agree with that. It's worth thinking about. Why do you think that is, Laura? Why would you feel different? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Really? How could you not stop for the nun? Yeah. But, you know, in the future, if you ever try to scam someone, you could dress up like a nun and it'll be the perfect trap, right? Yeah, it's an interesting point, right? It's an interesting point. And I think it shows the power of these monks and nuns is they occupy a space in society where you can trust them. And that is invaluable, right? I would argue, especially in our society, who can you trust anymore? Obviously, your dear old Professor Bill, but other than me, who else can you trust? No, that's sort of a stupid joke, but it's true, right? When you see homeless people, there's the stigma, there's the stereotype. They are on hard times because of something they did, right? They're probably addicted to drugs. They're probably dangerous. Maybe they're crazy, some combination of the three. And, you know, sometimes that's true, right? You get on the subway and you see somebody lying on the bench and you just think, you know what? I don't want to deal with this right now. I'm going to go to another car, right? And I've done that before too. But at the same time, these are also human beings. period, right? Just like the monks and nuns, they're also human beings, and they need to eat too, right? Even if they might make what we call bad choices or whatever, they need to eat too. So it's sort of it's a boundary that we set up, right? And Lauren expressed it very nicely, right? When we see a monk or a nun, we think, oh, this person is poor of their own choosing, right? As we were saying a moment ago too. And yet from what we might call an objective perspective, there are not major differences other than perhaps motivations, right? Reasons for them being destitute. And yet we are more likely to help one group versus the other. It's worth reflecting on, but I think in the interest of time, why don't we keep going? They beg for money more often than food. Yeah, well, yeah, they need money too, right? Okay, so the ascetic ideal Rhinoceros Horn Sutra. This was a pretty beautiful one, actually. This is the first time I ever taught the Rhinoceros Horn Sutra, and I think I will teach it again. I had a good time with it. One, I guess maybe I can ask you guys, were there any passages that jumped out at you? There's a few that I liked a lot, but it's full of these like pithy little short images and messages. What's the upshot? What's this deal with the Rhinoceros Horn Sutra? What's this arguing for? Why is it talking about a rhinoceros horn? It only has one horn. It's the defining feature of a rhinoceros. Actually, after the last class, I did some research. There are South Asian rhinoceri, or it would be rhinoceroses. I'm not actually sure. There is a South Asian rhinoceros. It's endangered, and it used to be more widespread in Asia. I didn't know that, though. It's sort of an interesting biological fact. They only have one horn. Why does it matter that they only have one horn? What does that have to do with anything? It's solitary by itself, right? A lot of the time, animals have two horns. Can you think of an animal with two horns? A what? A deer, yeah, a buck, right? Has the big antlers, like the Milwaukee Bucks. A bull, yeah. Most animals, in fact, if they have a horn, they usually come in pairs. Goats and rams and whatever else. I'm sure you can come up with other examples too. What is this a symbol for? Companionship, right? A lot of us are looking for our soulmate so we can find the other horn on the head of whatever animal we happen to be on right now, right? And what this is arguing is that's actually a mistake, right? Why is it a mistake to be a companion? It gives a bunch of reasons. They're kind of in line with what we've already talked about previously, talking about children and that sort of thing. It basically says it's better to be alone. Another thing, I asked you for passages that jumped out at you. One that jumped out at me was bamboo. I think it was number 4. Have you ever seen the roots of bamboo? So obviously there are these shoots, right? Do you know about the roots of bamboo? There's this like lattice network underneath, right? What's your name? Kyle. Yeah, so Kyle knows about the bamboo. And so it spreads really widely, and even if you chop a few down, they're just going to shoot back up because the root network still exists. So he compares us to bamboo roots. Are you guys tied up with the other shoots around you? Are you tied up with your friends and family? How are you tied up with your friends and family? It's worth thinking about, right? What are these roots that it's alluding to? How are we connected to other people? If somebody asked you to do something, would you do it? Your family members, if your dad told you to do something, Stephen, would you do it?
Yeah, I'm gonna say like
emotionally. Emotionally? Can you say more? How are you emotionally tied up with people?
Like, you start caring about people after
yeah, it's interesting, right? You meet a stranger, they do something you don't care, right? They say something you don't really care. They, whatever. Like it just doesn't matter to you, right? But the more intimate you get with somebody, all of a sudden their actions really affect you, right? And this is that root network that Kyle was nodding his head about a moment ago. So that one really struck me, right? And of course, this is arguing is cut out those roots. Be an individual stalk of bamboo. Don't be like these tied up people. Okay, it is almost 9:20. Let's keep going real quick. One thing I wanted to tie this in is we talked about this last time, misogyny, right? This ascetic ideal kind of pushes people to see women as a problem, right? If we're trying to be this unicorn horn, and not get tied up with women. All these beautiful women are always trying to distract us from our ascetic ideal. Of course, I say that in jest, but it helps maybe explain a little bit, right? These misogynistic tendencies in Buddhism, this emphasis on celibacy can lead to a prejudice against women. Do you guys see that? Again, Gautami's story, I would argue, challenges some of these prejudices, maybe not all of them, but some of them. She achieves enlightenment for Pete's sake, right? She says, suffering is understood, the cause of suffering allayed. I've experienced cessation, I've cultivated the path. Does that ring out to anybody? What is she talking about there? Four Noble Truths. So this is something good for the exam, right? If you ever see suffering, causes of suffering, cessation, the path, right? Four Noble Truths. So she's saying she's had the same realization that the Buddha had. She achieved enlightenment. The Buddha's like, yeah, good job. You achieved enlightenment. Some people don't believe in you. Do some miracles to show those fools that they're fools. And then she's like, all right, I'll do some miracles. And then the narrator says she had a really stellar enlightenment. Finally, Angulimala, finger necklace. What's the deal with finger necklace? Why do you have a finger necklace? Is that hand to you? Yeah, so he was a Brahmin. His teacher told him to kill 1,000 people and he'll have some sort of achievement if he does it. He kills 999. He has this big old necklace of fingers, each one severed from one of his victims. And then he sees the Buddha walking through the woods. He's like, oh yeah, here's number 1,000 coming right up. But he starts running after him and he can't catch him. The Buddha's sort of walking slowly, but for whatever reason, as fast as Angulimala tries to run, he can't catch up to him. And then eventually the Buddha stops and he says, I have stopped, Angulimala. You stop too, right? And so there's sort of this moment where he, it's sort of a come to Jesus moment. I don't know if you've ever heard that phrase, but he has a realization. He sees the errors of his ways and he turns himself around. And other things happen too. There's this really interesting moment where a woman is having birth pains and he says, sort of by the truth of his vow to not take life, he tries to help this woman. It's really kind of a beautiful image. And then people also abuse him because he killed their friends and loved ones. And then the Buddha's like, bear it, Brahmin. If you kept the karmic results of these deeds, then you'd be going to hell. So why don't you take your L's right now and you won't have to go there. So what's the point of this story? Well, I imagine you guys are probably all sinners. You guys sinners? This is Catholic school. You got to be a sinner of some kind, right? But you're probably not quite as bad as he was. I'm going to wager that if you have a finger necklace, it's not quite up to 999. And so as bad as he was, as bad as you are, you're not going to be ever as bad as he is, right? And yet he was able to turn his life around. And so if you sign up for my team, then you can turn your life around too. 999. All right. Any questions? I promised you a break, so let's take a 7-minute break, shall we? It doesn't have to be only 7 minutes, but let's try to stick to the 7:30 plan. All right, so let's take a break, y'all. I'm gonna mute you, Walter. Intermission, take a break, look over your notes. Like I said before, a big part of this exam will be organizing your notes, organizing the readings, having them available when you want them. So I encourage you to open them up, download whatever you don't have, because again, it's open note, it's open book. And so, open it up and let's get ready to take this exam. In case you weren't aware, the exam is on Moodle. So if you're like really itching to get ready, I can show you how to do that. This one. And of course, if you just want to take a break, you can too. So here's the link to midterm exam 1. I can put it in the chat. And it opens at 7:30. So that is in 6 minutes. But it's 1 hour, 15 minutes, and it goes until 9:35, like the end of our usual class. So if you don't want to start right at 7:30, you can take a longer break too. It's up to you. But yeah, let's take 5. I'll turn the lights on. Oh yeah. Yeah, people need chargers. Feel free to figure that out. There's two here. There's maybe one under there. There's maybe another over there somewhere, but yeah, we can figure that out. Okay. Any questions, guys? You feel prepared? I'm still recording. I'll stop recording.